It was a quiet evening in Savannah, Georgia, the kind of night when the air feels thick with salt and memory. I sat by the kitchen table, the same spot I'd used for decades, staring at the little white pill beside my teacup. For 23 years, that pill had been part of my life, a small comfort before sleep, or so I thought. I didn't know it was the reason my nights were stolen from me. If you're watching this, please like the video, subscribe, and stay until the end. You'll want to hear what I found out. For 23 years, I took the same small white pill before bed. I never missed a night, not even once. It sat in a tiny plastic bottle on my nightstand, always refilled on time, always waiting for me like an old, loyal friend. My husband, Harold, used to tease me gently about it. "You and your little helper," he'd laugh. But after he passed, I didn't stop. In fact, that pill became more important than ever. It was my way to escape the empty house, the quiet rooms, and the sound of my own thoughts echoing against the walls. My wife, well, my second husband's wife now, Margaret, she insisted I take them. She'd say it helped with my nerves, that it stopped the bad dreams and the restlessness that kept me tossing through the night. Every evening she'd bring it to me with a glass of lukewarm water, her hand steady, her smile soft. "You need your rest, darling," she'd say, brushing my shoulder as she turned off the lamp. I'd swallow the pill, close my eyes, and within minutes, the world would blur into silence. It became our ritual, the kind that feels safe, almost holy, because it's predictable. I didn't question it. I didn't even ask what the pills were called anymore. When the doctor's label rubbed off, she said she'd handle the refills herself to save me the trouble. I trusted her completely. Why wouldn't I? We'd been married long enough to share everything, our meals, our money, our secrets. Or at least, that's what I believed. Each night, after I took my pill, the same thing would happen. My body would grow heavy, my limbs soft, my eyelids slow to obey. I'd feel the faint hum of sleep pulling me under like the tide. Sometimes I'd think I heard her voice faintly through the fog, a low whisper, the sound of movement in the hallway, maybe a door creaking shut. But then I'd be gone, out cold. Hours would pass, and when I woke, the sunlight would already be cutting through the curtains, my breakfast plate warm on the table, my coffee steaming. She'd hum while making toast, always smiling, always gentle. It felt comforting, too comforting maybe, because soon I began depending on it, not just for rest, but for peace. I couldn't sleep without it. The one time I forgot to take it during a trip, I lay awake until dawn, my heart racing, my skin crawling. Margaret scolded me lovingly for being careless with your medication. I apologized, like a child being corrected by a teacher. Looking back now, I see how carefully she built that dependence, how she made sure the pill wasn't just part of my routine, but part of my identity. I'd tell my friends from church about it sometimes. They'd laugh and say, "At least you're getting good sleep." They had no idea. None of us ever suspect the things that hide behind kindness. I used to brag that Margaret took such good care of me, that she always made sure I had what I needed. "She's my angel," I'd say. Those words taste bitter now. There were little things, of course, things I brushed off because I wanted to, like how she always insisted I go to bed early, even when we had company, or how she'd hush me if I stirred at night. "Don't tire yourself," she'd whisper. "You need your rest." I thought it was love. I thought it was devotion, but it was control, complete, quiet control. Sometimes I'd wake up and find things slightly out of place. The mail rearranged. My handbag moved. Once I found my checkbook open on the counter, a pen beside it. I assumed I'd left it there. I blamed my memory, my age, even my clumsiness. Margaret would smile sweetly and say, "You're getting forgetful, dear. That's what the pills are for." And I believed her. Because when you love someone, you don't see the red flags. You see red roses. For years, my life was painted in that soft, drugged haze. I didn't notice birthdays slipping by, conversations half heard, moments lost in the fog. I thought I was resting. I thought I was healing. In truth, I was being erased, night after night, by someone who knew exactly how much I trusted her. Even now, when I think back, I can almost feel that pill on my tongue, chalky, bitter, harmless looking. I can still see her silhouette by the window, her robe tied neatly, her hand steady as she handed me my sleep. 23 years of the same routine, 23 years of silence, and I never once thought to ask why she never took one herself. That's the part that haunts me most. Not that she gave them to me, but that I thanked her for it, every single night. The years passed quietly, the way a long, slow drizzle turns into a flood without anyone noticing. One night became another, then a week, then a decade. I didn't feel time slipping away. The pills saw to that. Each evening, after dinner, I'd sit in my armchair with my blanket folded neatly on my lap, waiting for Margaret to bring me my nightly pill. She never forgot, not once. It became our marriage's rhythm, her care, my rest. Simple, gentle, and completely numbing. The strangest thing is how peaceful life felt while it was slowly being stolen from me. Our home in Charleston felt warm and calm, the kind of calm that hides danger beneath it. I'd sleep through storms, through arguments, through moments that I should have remembered. I missed entire nights that should have stayed carved in my mind. Sometimes I'd wake up in a slightly different position than I remembered falling asleep in. Once or twice, I found myself tucked under a blanket I hadn't used, or in a robe I didn't recall putting on. Margaret would always smile when I mentioned it, pat my hand, and say, "You must have done it half asleep again, love." And I'd laugh, because I believed her, because I wanted to believe her. Love can blind you even when your eyes are wide open. People started noticing before I did. My neighbor, Evelyn, once told me, "You've lost so much weight, dear." "You look pale." I brushed it off, said the pills made me sleep better, that I was fine. I didn't see that my life had been reduced to a few quiet hours before I swallowed my nightly escape. The days in between blurred together. Groceries, church on Sundays, the same meals reheated in the microwave. Margaret took care of everything. The bills, the errands, the phone calls. I thought she was being helpful. I didn't see that she was slowly removing me from my own life. Sometimes I'd hear faint noises after I took the pill, the sound of footsteps down the hallway, the low murmur of voices, maybe the back door creaking open. I'd try to lift my head, but it felt like it weighed 100 pounds. The darkness would close in again before I could make sense of anything. By morning, the world was neat again. Dishes washed, curtains drawn, everything in its place. Margaret would hum softly while brewing coffee, as if nothing unusual had happened. I used to have friends over once a week for bridge night. Then, slowly, that stopped. "You need rest," she'd say. "They understand." And I let her cancel. I stopped calling people back. I stopped writing letters. I told myself I was tired, getting older, that it was natural to slow down. But the truth is, I wasn't slowing down. I was being put to sleep, one small dose at a time. I can't count how many moments I lost. Holidays, anniversaries, quiet conversations that I might have cherished. Sometimes I'd wake up to find new things in the house, a vase I didn't remember buying, a new rug in the living room, even a painting above the fireplace. When I asked about them, she always had a story. "You picked it," she'd say, laughing. "Don't you remember?" I'd feel embarrassed for forgetting. I thought age was playing tricks on me. I didn't realize someone else was playing a far crueler one. Even my sleep began to feel unnatural, heavy, dreamless, almost like death. I'd wake up groggy, my thoughts foggy until afternoon. But Margaret always had an explanation. "You just need to rest more," she'd say. And because she spoke with such calm authority, I listened. When she refilled my pills at the pharmacy, I never questioned what they were. The labels changed over the years, different names, different shapes, but the effect never did. The same silence, the same darkness, the same stolen nights. There were rare moments when doubt brushed against me, faint and fleeting. Like when I'd find the smell of cologne in the living room, not the kind I'd ever worn. Or when she'd come to bed much later, whispering she'd been watching TV downstairs, though the television was cold when I checked in the morning. but I silenced those thoughts. I told myself not to be paranoid, that she'd earned my trust. I didn't know that trust can be the easiest thing for a liar to weaponize. Looking back, those were the lost years, the quiet years, where everything seemed fine on the surface. I baked on Sundays, watered the plants, smiled for family photos that I barely remembered taking. But behind every smile was a fog I couldn't see through. And in that fog, Margaret moved freely. She decided what I knew, what I forgot, and what I would never wake up to. The older I got, the more I realized my memories didn't line up the way they should have. Whole years felt like blank spaces in a photo album, faces missing, moments blurred. I'd flip through old pictures and see myself smiling at birthdays, anniversaries, holidays, but I couldn't recall being there. I recognized the dress I was wearing, the cake on the table, even the wallpaper behind me, but the actual memory was gone. It was like watching someone else live my life while I slept through it. I remember one summer when my niece got married. The photographs showed me sitting in the front row, holding flowers, but I didn't remember the ceremony, the music, or her husband's face. When I asked Margaret about it, she smiled and said, "Oh, you were just tired that day. You dozed off for a bit after lunch." That was her answer for everything. I believed it because I wanted peace more than I wanted the truth. I didn't notice how fast time was moving without me. One Christmas, I was wrapping gifts with Margaret in our old living room, and the next, I was waking up in a different house entirely, one I didn't remember buying. "We moved last spring," she told me, stirring her coffee like it was nothing. "You said you wanted something smaller." I nodded, even though every part of me knew I would have remembered something like that. But I didn't, and that scared me. Still, I swallowed the fear like I swallowed those pills. Quietly. It became easier to stop asking questions. Every time I tried, she had an answer that made me feel foolish. I began doubting my own mind. I told myself maybe it was age, or stress, or early forgetfulness. Maybe I was the problem. That's how control works, not through force, but through doubt. And doubt is powerful. It keeps you silent. Margaret never changed, though. She looked the same, sounded the same, moved with the same certainty. Her eyes were sharper than mine, her steps quicker. Sometimes I'd wake up and find her dressed, makeup on, as if she'd been somewhere. When I asked, she'd laugh and say she was up early for a walk. I believed her, until the morning I noticed her heels had dirt on them, not from a walk on pavement, but from somewhere softer, somewhere secret. Even the house began to whisper things I couldn't explain. There were receipts tucked in drawers with names I didn't recognize, restaurant bills for two, bottles of wine I didn't remember buying. I once found a men's watch under the couch. It wasn't mine, and it wasn't from anyone we knew. When I showed it to her, she took it quickly and said, "It's from a neighbor. He left it here by mistake, I didn't ask who." I started keeping a small notebook, just a few words each morning, to help me remember the day before. But soon, I noticed something strange. There were gaps in the pages. Whole weeks I had no memory of writing in. The handwriting changed slightly too, slanted, slower, uneven. I didn't even recognize my own script. That's when I began to understand that something much deeper was wrong. It wasn't just sleepiness or age. It was control. My life had become a string of quiet disappearances. Friends stopped visiting. Family stopped calling. Margaret told everyone I preferred to rest more, that I wasn't up for guests. But I never said that. I wanted to see them. I wanted to be around people. I just didn't know she was building walls while I slept. She made sure I stayed comfortable. That was her trick. A clean house, warm meals, soft blankets, and those same white pills every night. She'd smile as she handed them to me, like it was love. And maybe once, it was. But love without truth is just another kind of poison. Sometimes, I'd wake up in the middle of the night to see her sitting by the window, staring out into the dark. She never turned when I called her name. Her shoulders would tense, then relax slowly. I'd hear the faint click of her phone screen lighting up, Then she'd whisper something I couldn't hear. When she finally came back to bed, she'd slide under the sheets and say, "You were dreaming again." I stopped believing my own senses. That's what the years of quiet do. They make you question yourself until you surrender. And I did. I surrendered every piece of myself to her version of reality. But still, some things don't stay buried. A mother's instinct, a woman's gut, they know when something's wrong, even when the mind is fogged. I began to feel that pull again, that uneasiness deep inside. It was faint at first, like a candle flicker in a dark room. But it was there. The missed memories weren't just lapses of age. They were signs, warnings, things she didn't want me to see. And deep down, I began to wonder, what was she doing during all those nights I never remembered? Then one evening, something shifted. It started as a small mistake at the pharmacy. I had gone to refill my sleeping pills, the same white tablets I had taken for 23 years without fail. The pharmacist handed me a slightly lighter dose than usual. At first, I didn't notice. I poured the pill into my glass of water and went to bed as always. But that night, for the first time in decades, I did not sleep. My eyes remained open, tracing the dim shapes of our bedroom. The familiar quiet of the house, usually comforting, felt different, tense, expectant, like the calm before a storm. I could hear the faint hum of the refrigerator, the distant creak of the floorboards, and then something else. A shadow moved under the light slipping through the kitchen doorway. A voice, not mine, not one I recognized in the house's normal rhythm, whispered softly, then laughed. Margaret's voice, and another voice, deeper, unfamiliar. My heart started pounding. My stomach tightened. Something inside me surged. Not fear exactly, but recognition. Recognition that I had been blind for far too long. I slid quietly out of bed, my slippers pressing against the cold floor. Each step felt like walking through years of forgotten memories. I pressed my eye to the crack of the kitchen door, careful not to make a sound. There she was, my wife, Margaret, her face lit by the soft yellow of a lamp, smiling, leaning close to a man I recognized from old family photographs, someone I had trusted, someone who should have been part of my life, not hidden in the shadows. The sight made my hands shake. My knees almost buckled. For 23 years, I had given her trust, given her patience, given her every night of silence, and now I saw her betray it all in one quiet moment. And then I saw it. The small bottle of pills on the counter, the same pills I took every night without question, now being poured into a glass of wine. She laughed softly, her voice like ice. "He sleeps like a baby after this," she said. "He'll never know." Every word cut sharper than any slap, more piercing than any yell. I froze, unable to breathe, unable to move. The truth, so simple, so obvious, slammed into me. I had not been sleeping. I had been drugged, for decades. Every memory I thought I had, every time I had felt peace in my home, every moment I trusted her. It had been carefully controlled, stolen from me by the very person I loved most. I backed away slowly, my head spinning. The room tilted. The betrayal was not just in action, it was in intention. I had been silenced, erased, convinced that my nights were my own when they had never been mine at all. Every creak I thought was the house settling. Every shadow I blamed on fatigue. Every dream I dismissed, she had engineered, and she had done it with a smile. Every gesture of care, every kiss on my forehead, every whisper of "sleep well" had been a lie. I had believed in love, but what I had been living was deception, carefully masked by routine and trust. For a long while, I just stood there, trembling, watching, learning. I needed to absorb the full weight of it before I could move. Rage, sorrow, disbelief, they mixed inside me, impossible to separate. My mind ran over the years, trying to find signs I had missed. Each small event, the unexpected visits from friends she said I didn't need, the letters I couldn't remember writing, the calls that never came, all fell into place. They were pieces of a puzzle I had thought I was too old or too tired to solve, but now the puzzle was complete. She had been orchestrating it all. That night, I realized something else. For 23 years, I had slept through my life, and it was no accident. Every laugh I thought was mine, every conversation I thought I remembered, it had been orchestrated. And now, for the first time in decades, I had clarity. The world she had built around me was a cage, and the key had been in her hands all along. I felt the shift in myself, subtle but profound. Fear began to turn into resolve. Pain began to turn into focus. I did not rush into confrontation. That night, I simply watched. I memorized routines, learned her patterns, took note of her trust in her own secrecy. I realized I had the advantage now. I was awake, and she believed I would never see. That small mistake at the pharmacy had given me the greatest gift I could have had after 23 years: consciousness. I could see and I could plan. For the first time in decades, I felt a spark of empowerment. I knew what I had to do. I had been silent for too long. I had allowed her deception to stretch over 23 years. But now that silence had ended. The house, the nights, the memories, they would no longer belong to her alone. I had begun to reclaim what had been mine, step by careful step. The change had begun. I was no longer just surviving in my own home. I was preparing to take back my life. That night, I went to bed eventually, but I did not sleep like I had before. I lay awake with my mind racing, not with fear, but with strategy. For the first time in years, I felt the quiet pulse of my own power, a rhythm that had been hidden, drowned out by pills and deceit. I realized that sleep could wait. Action could not. And in that quiet, shadowed room, I promised myself that Margaret would never again have the upper hand in my life. That night, my heart pounded like never before. I crept toward the kitchen, every step measured and silent, feeling both fear and a strange clarity. The faint glow under the door grew brighter as I drew closer, and I froze for a moment, listening. There were voices, muffled but unmistakable, speaking in soft tones, laughter that I had not heard in decades, and the clink of glasses. My hands trembled, but I forced myself to peer through the crack of the kitchen door. What I saw made my blood run cold. There she was, Margaret, my wife of more than 40 years, standing close to a man I barely recognized at first. They laughed together, their heads close, shoulders brushing, and her hand rested on his arm in a way that sent a chill down my spine. I squinted to make sense of the man's face. Then it hit me. I had seen him years ago in family photos, smiling at some gathering, polite and distant. My brother, my own blood, the person I had once trusted implicitly. He had come into our lives rarely, but the memories of his visits were always neutral, unremarkable, polite. And yet, here he was now, in my kitchen, leaning casually against the counter, a glass in his hand, talking to my wife with the ease of a man who had been there many nights before. My mind raced. How many nights? How many times had this been happening while I drifted off under the influence of my pills, believing I was safe in my own home, that my life was normal, that my love had been returned? I stepped back slowly, my hands pressed to the edge of the wall for support. My pulse thundered in my ears, yet I could not tear my eyes away. Margaret poured wine into his glass, and then my stomach turned. I saw the small bottle beside her on the counter. My pills. The same pills I had taken faithfully every night for 23 years, thinking they were simply helping me sleep. I watched as she tipped the contents of the bottle into his drink, shaking slightly, just enough for a full dose to dissolve. She smiled, soft and quiet, and said something I couldn't hear clearly, but her words carried a cruel satisfaction in her tone. "He sleeps like a baby after this. He'll never know," I imagined she said, because the motion and her expression left no doubt. She had been doing it for decades, and I had trusted her completely. For a moment, I froze, my breath caught in my throat. Memories flashed violently in my mind. Birthdays I could not remember clearly. Holidays blurred together. The faint sounds of arguments I never woke to. The quiet footsteps in the hall that I always ignored as dreams or imagination. All of it had been hidden from me by that pill. Every time I thought I had slept through the night peacefully, I had been silenced, kept from seeing, kept from feeling, kept from the truth of my own life. I staggered back into the shadow of the hallway, gripping the doorframe, trying to steady my shaking hands. Anger, disbelief, betrayal, and grief collided in a violent storm inside me. I realized then the depth of her deception. 23 years of nights, 23 years of my trust, my love, my life had been betrayed. Each day that followed, I had assumed normality, assumed peace, assumed that the woman I had given everything to was my partner, my friend, my companion. And yet, there she was, laughing, sharing intimacy, sharing secrets, sharing something I should have been a part of, my own life, while I lay docile, unaware, doped into sleep. The realization made my knees weak, yet the clarity it brought sharpened my mind like a blade. I understood that for all those years, my wife had chosen deception over truth, betrayal over love, and she had done it carefully, methodically, ensuring that I remained unaware. I could not act immediately. My hands shook too violently. My mind raced too quickly. I leaned against the wall, my back to the kitchen, breathing shallow, thinking of every single pill I had taken, every single night I had slept, every single memory I thought was mine. How much of my life had been taken from me under the guise of care? How many opportunities had slipped by while I slumbered? And yet, as the shock settled into a cold, burning resolve, I knew what I had to do. I would not confront her blindly. I would watch, I would record, and I would gather proof. For the first time in decades, I felt fully awake, fully alive, fully aware of the power I had ignored for so long. That night, I retreated quietly back to my room. Every nerve in my body was alert. Every instinct screamed for action, yet I paced slowly, thinking through every step. I could feel a simmering anger, yes, but also a clarity that I had not felt since the day I married her. I understood now the stakes, the depth of her deception, and the meticulousness of her betrayal. I knew that this night would change everything. I lay down again in bed, but this time I was not going to sleep. I stared at the ceiling, my mind replaying the scene over and over, taking note of every detail, every movement, every sound. I had been patient for decades, but now patience had a purpose. By the time the first hints of dawn crept through the curtains, I had formed a plan. I would reclaim my life. I would not only expose her treachery, but also ensure that she could no longer manipulate, deceive, or control me through the very pill I had trusted for so long. The first shock had passed, leaving in its place a quiet, relentless determination. For the first time in years, I felt awake in every sense of the word, aware of betrayal, aware of deceit, and aware of the steps I needed to take to restore my life. That night, my sleep ended and my vigil began. The next morning, I acted as if nothing had happened. I took the usual routine: breakfast at the table, a cup of tea, a smile for Margaret. But beneath the calm, a storm brewed. I pretended to take my pills, just as I had every night for 23 years. But this time, I hid the tablet under my tongue, letting it dissolve there, never reaching my stomach. She noticed nothing. She poured my water, whispered her customary, "Sleep well, dear," and kissed my forehead. I held back my reaction, my hand shaking slightly as I accepted her gesture. Inwardly, I promised myself that I would never be fooled again. That ritual, once a symbol of comfort, had become a tool of control, a cage I had lived inside for decades. It was time to take it back. For several nights, I followed the same pattern. I pretended to sleep, closing my eyes, letting my body appear still, while my mind raced with careful observation. I had a camera, discreet and small, hidden beneath the blanket at the edge of the bed, angled perfectly to capture the hall and the kitchen. Every step she took, every movement, every whisper and laugh was recorded. Some nights she went alone, walking down the hall in the dark, checking on things I hadn't been aware of before. Other nights, the man, my brother, appeared again. They spoke in low tones, their faces lit by the dim glow of lamps or the reflection from the refrigerator. I watched silently, every detail seared into my memory, every proof documented. It was not easy. Watching them, seeing the betrayal unfold over and over again, made my stomach churn. My hands shook constantly, and the nights were long and sleepless. The betrayal was deeper than I had ever imagined. The same woman who had promised love, companionship, and care, who had shared decades of life with me, had chosen a secret life that had used me as its unwitting participant. I felt anger, yes, but also a strange clarity, a meticulous focus. Every pill she gave me, every quiet night I had slept, every single opportunity that had been lost while I remained oblivious was now fuel for the plan I had begun to construct. I started gathering evidence beyond the recordings. I collected receipts, photographs, letters, and phone records that had been left within reach over the years. Each document, each small trace of activity helped me understand the extent of her deceit. She had not simply been unfaithful, she had orchestrated a life for herself at my expense, ensuring my ignorance. The depth of the planning and the audacity of the act were staggering, but so was the clarity that had now replaced my shock. I understood the power of patience, of observation, and of acting with precision. This was no longer a matter of emotional betrayal. It had become a matter of reclaiming my life, my dignity, and my autonomy. I also revisited the pill bottle itself. For 23 years, it had been a symbol of comfort, a nightly ritual that I had trusted blindly. Now it was a tool, a reminder of the manipulation I had endured. I documented every label, every pharmacy print, every prescription refill. I knew that this evidence would be crucial. I realized that her crime was not merely personal, it had legal implications. She had controlled my perception of reality, my consciousness, my ability to act freely in my own home. For decades, I had to ensure that the proof was undeniable, meticulous, and comprehensive. Every night, I perfected my routine. I lay in the bed, pretending to sleep, heart beating quietly under the covers, listening to every sound, watching every movement through the camera lens, and taking notes mentally for later verification. I mapped her footsteps, memorized the timings of her comings and goings, noted the manner in which she handled the pills, and observed the interactions with the man who had infiltrated my trust. My memory, once clouded by the very substances meant to induce sleep, was now sharper than ever. I was awake in every sense that mattered. I prepared for the confrontation, knowing it would need to be controlled, undeniable, and absolute. I envisioned how I would present the evidence, how the recordings, the documents, and the observations would unfold to reveal the truth. The plan was not born of vengeance. It was born of clarity, justice, and the need to reclaim the life I had been cheated of. Each moment of patience, each night of silent observation, each careful note, each hidden camera placement had led to this. I had transformed my years of betrayal into a strategy that could not fail. As the nights passed, I felt strength returning that I had not known for decades. The anger, the betrayal, and the humiliation had turned into focus, precision, and determination. I could see the full scope of her actions now, and I understood the consequences she could not escape. And most importantly, I understood that I was no longer the passive victim I had been for 23 years. I was awake, aware, prepared, and ready to reclaim what was mine. Every whispered laugh, every secretive footstep, every pill she had given me now fueled a resolution that was steady, unyielding, and final. A week later, I decided it was time. The house was quiet, sunlight falling through the curtains in long, pale streaks that landed across the wooden floor. The air carried that faint, musty smell of old furniture and dust that had settled through years of stillness. I had spent nights recording, collecting, and documenting every shred of proof, every movement Margaret made, every whisper, Every visit from my brother had been captured clearly. I'd transferred the footage onto a flash drive, stored inside the inner pocket of my jacket, and waited for the right morning, the one where she couldn't deny what she had done. That morning had finally arrived. I asked her to sit in the living room after breakfast. She wore her usual calm expression, the one that had always disarmed me, a gentle smile, polite concern in her voice, as if nothing could possibly be wrong. I looked at her, really looked, for the first time in years, not as a husband clouded by trust, but as a man who could see. The years had been kind to her, perhaps too kind. She carried herself with that careful grace of someone who had never been truly confronted. My brother arrived not long after, carrying that same smug composure he'd worn all his life. He greeted me casually, as if he hadn't been sneaking into my home night after night. I motioned for him to sit as well. The silence that filled the room was sharp. I switched on the television and inserted the flash drive. The screen flickered, and for a brief moment, all three of us stared at the reflection of our faces before the footage began to play. It started quietly, a dimly lit kitchen, the clock reading 2:47 a.m. Margaret and my brother, sitting close together, laughing softly. Her hand rested on his shoulder as she poured wine into 2 glasses. Then, on the table beside her, the small bottle of pills, my pills, rolled slightly as she moved. "He sleeps through anything," she said on the recording, her voice calm, confident, cold. "He never suspects. He never will." The words hung in the air long after the sound stopped echoing from the speakers. My brother's face changed first, color draining, mouth tightening. Margaret's hands trembled slightly on her lap, but her voice was steady when she spoke. "This isn't what it looks like," she said, the same line people use when they have no other truth left to offer. I said nothing. The next clip played automatically. Another night, another conversation. This time, the sound was clearer. "Just a few more months," my brother's voice said. "Then everything will be settled." She nodded. "He'll never wake up long enough to notice anything." I paused the video. The silence was heavier now, the kind that wraps itself around your throat. I turned to them slowly. "For 23 years, I said, I trusted you both. Every night, I swallowed the pill you gave me. I thought it was care. It was control. You took my sleep, my years, and my peace, and you expected me to die without ever knowing." My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. Truth spoken plainly has more power than shouting ever could. Margaret looked down, her face pale. My brother tried to speak, muttering something about misunderstanding, about me overreacting, but I raised my hand. "Don't," I said. "Every moment is on that drive. Every refill, every step, every lie. You can't talk your way out of 23 years of evidence." He stopped. The look on his face, that moment where arrogance turned to fear, was one I'll never forget. It wasn't satisfaction I felt. It was closure. A slow, heavy kind that doesn't bring joy but ends the noise inside your head. I stood then, walking to the small table by the window where my lawyer's card lay waiting. I'd called him the day before, explained everything, sent copies of the files. The law would take care of what remained. "You'll hear from him soon," I said quietly. "The house, the accounts, the investments, all of it was in my name. You used me to keep yourselves comfortable. That comfort ends today." Margaret opened her mouth, perhaps to plead or explain, but I'd already turned away. There was nothing left to hear. For a long time, no one moved. The television screen went black, reflecting our faces again. 3 people who had once shared blood and vows, now strangers bound only by betrayal. I looked at them one last time. She looked smaller somehow, her composure cracked, her posture no longer perfect. My brother looked lost, his confidence dissolved. I realized then that revenge didn't need fire or fury. Sometimes it was as simple as truth playing on a screen, undeniable and silent. I walked to the door, picked up the suitcase I had packed the night before, and paused. "For 23 years, you made sure I never woke up," I said softly. Now you'll never sleep again." I left the keys on the counter and walked out into the daylight. The air outside felt lighter than it had in decades. My steps were slow but certain, the sound of the gravel under my shoes steady and deliberate. I didn't look back. Some doors don't deserve a final glance. As I reached the end of the driveway, I felt the first hint of peace touch me. A quiet, unfamiliar kind that comes when you finally stop wondering and start living again. I had spent more than 2 decades asleep in my own life. Now I was awake, truly awake, and I wasn't going to waste another moment. After I walked out that morning, I didn't look back. The sun had fully risen by then, and the city streets were beginning to stir with life. The air smelled crisp and fresh, carrying the faint tang of early autumn leaves along with the distant noise of traffic and chatter. I took a deep breath and felt the weight of 23 years lift slightly from my shoulders. Each step I took was deliberate, steady, and unburdened, though the memories of decades of betrayal lingered behind me like shadows that could never fully be erased. For the first time in years, I felt clarity in the chaos that had once consumed my life. I realized that leaving was not an act of anger, but of survival, of reclaiming the time and energy that had been stolen from me so systematically, so quietly, and with such cruel precision. I moved into a small apartment downtown, a place filled with sunlight, plants, and quiet corners for reflection. The walls were bare at first, but slowly I added photographs from my youth, mementos of happier times, and a few small pieces of furniture that felt like mine alone. Each item became a marker of reclaimed life, reminders that I had the right to exist without fear, without manipulation, without someone dictating my reality while I slept through it. I set up a routine that included early morning walks, visits to the local library, and afternoons spent simply sitting by the window with a cup of tea, watching the city move and listening to life carry on around me. These small freedoms, ordinary as they seemed, were profound. They were proof that I was awake, aware, and no longer subject to the quiet tyranny of a spouse I had once trusted with my very existence. In the weeks following my departure, legal processes unfolded. The house that had been a symbol of my life, my marriage, and my trust was now officially mine again, along with every account and asset that had been under my name all along. My lawyer guided me through each step carefully, explaining the transfer of funds, the closure of accounts that had been mismanaged, and the legal protections that ensured I would never be silenced again. Each signature, each document I received felt like a small victory, a tangible, undeniable confirmation that the years of deceit were ending. Margaret and my brother had tried to hide in plain sight, believing my obedience and sleep meant perpetual submission. But obedience and ignorance are not the same as consent, and the law finally reflected that truth. I did not seek revenge beyond what was necessary. I did not contact them, did not broadcast their betrayal further than the necessary legal proceedings required. There was no satisfaction in prolonged conflict, only exhaustion and wasted energy. What mattered was reclaiming my life, my autonomy, and my dignity. Yet, in the quiet moments when I allowed myself to reflect, I could see the impact of my actions. Margaret, stripped of the control she had wielded, and my brother, confronted with the undeniable truth of their actions. Neither could undo what they had done, and neither could recover the years of my silent suffering that had finally been witnessed, validated, and addressed. The balance had shifted, not through anger or theatrics, but through deliberate, unyielding action that spoke louder than words ever could. Every night now, I sleep without the pills that once kept me blind. I drink my tea in the morning without fear of what the day might reveal behind the curtain, and I live in the knowledge that every decision, every moment of courage, has restored pieces of myself that had been quietly eroded over decades. I take walks in the early mornings, feeling the breeze against my face, hearing the birds, noticing the sunlight glinting on the sidewalks, and I smile quietly because freedom is, in its own way, a luxury that cannot be measured by money or time. I am no longer trapped in a life dictated by others' selfish desires. I am present, awake, and finally living on my own terms. Sometimes I reflect on what could have been, the years lost to ignorance, the moments I might have spent awake with the life I deserved. But I do not dwell. Reflection does not mean regret. Reflection means understanding. I understand now that my love, my trust, and my patience were not weaknesses. They were tools that could be used to build my own justice. I understand that sleeping through betrayal does not mean losing completely. It means waiting for the right moment to rise. I understand that a woman of 70, armed with the truth and her own courage, is more formidable than any illusion of control a deceitful spouse can wield. I have regained my life, my home, my peace, and my dignity. Each morning, I sit by the window with a cup of tea, watching the world wake and move, feeling gratitude for every moment that was once stolen but is now mine. I am awake, fully awake, and every breath is a victory. The echoes of those years will always be there, but they no longer control me. I live openly, honestly, and entirely for myself, aware that the power of truth, patience, and courage can restore even the most stolen life. Sleep is no longer a refuge. Life is no longer a dream. I am present, I am free, and I am finally awake in every sense of the word. Now, sitting by the window each morning, I watch the sun rise over the city, and I feel something I haven't felt in decades: clarity. For 23 years, my nights were stolen, my mind quieted, my body obedient to a pill I trusted. I thought I was sleeping, but I was only trapped. Every whisper, every step, every secret I missed is now a part of my memory, replayed and understood. I think about all those years when I believed I was living a peaceful life. I now realize I was only existing in someone else's story, unaware of how deeply I had been manipulated. The betrayal is hard to name, harder to measure, because it was invisible, slow, and complete. I had given everything, my trust, my love, my body's own rhythm, and received nothing but false comfort in return. The awareness that comes with truth is sharp, sometimes cutting, but it is honest, and for the first time in decades, honesty is mine. I remember walking out that morning, suitcase in hand, feeling the wind against my face as though it was brushing away the years of deception. The city felt alive, the sounds of life real and immediate, not blurred by sleep or distraction. I could breathe deeply, knowing that for the first time, my life was controlled by no one but myself. No more waiting, no more fear, no more unearned obedience. Each step I took toward freedom was deliberate, a reclamation of what had always been mine: my awareness, my voice, my right to exist fully awake. I thought of the small apartment I would move into, the plants I would nurture, the little rituals that would become entirely my own. I imagined each morning, each evening, each cup of tea, each quiet hour by the window, and I felt a calm strength in the idea that I could shape my life entirely for myself. The awareness of being awake, truly awake, is a power that no betrayal can touch. I look back at the 23 years with both sadness and understanding. Sadness for the time lost, for the moments that were stolen, for the things I never saw, and the love I thought I had been sharing, but which was used against me. But I also understand now that those years built me in ways I could not have predicted. They forced patience, they demanded observation, and they gave me the clarity to act when I finally understood the truth. I had learned to watch carefully, to notice details, to question the surface of life rather than simply accept it. What seemed like endless sleep was in fact preparation for awareness, for reclaiming, for justice. In a strange way, the very act of being deceived sharpened me, gave me perspective, and gave me the tools I needed to take back what was mine. I no longer fear the silence because I have learned that silence can be broken at any time with the right action. In those quiet moments, I think of Margaret and my brother, the people who tried to manipulate, to hide, to control. I feel no joy in their downfall, only the satisfaction that truth finally found its way. They believed I was powerless, that I would remain asleep indefinitely, that I would never see the lies, the secrets, the betrayals, but truth is patient. It waits for clarity, for observation, for understanding. And when it arrives, it can dismantle decades of deceit with calm certainty. I did not act in anger. I acted in awareness. My actions were measured, deliberate, and designed not for vengeance, but for justice. And justice, when delivered with calm resolve, is louder than anger, more powerful than shouting, and more lasting than any punishment alone. I also reflect on what it means to reclaim life at this stage, in the later years, for a woman like me. It is not only legal or material reclamation, it is personal, spiritual, and emotional. It is waking fully to your own life, choosing what to see, what to feel, and how to respond. It is knowing that betrayal does not define the betrayed, that the actions of others cannot erase who you are, and that the past, no matter how long, can be reconciled with the present through clarity, courage, and decisive action. I no longer feel the fear of sleep. I no longer fear being left behind or being ignored. I no longer depend on the validation of those who once betrayed me. My life, fully awake and fully mine, is now its own reward. If you are watching this, know that age, years of silence, and decades of manipulation do not diminish your power. Even if someone has controlled your nights, stolen your awareness, or hidden the truth from you, it is never too late to reclaim your life. You can wake fully, act deliberately, and take back what belongs to you, whether it is your freedom, your dignity, or your property. I did not need to yell. I did not need to fight in anger. I did not need to wait for an apology that would never come. I simply acted with clarity, patience, and courage. That is the real power of waking up after decades of sleep. That is the real victory. So I tell you now, with every word deliberate, clear, and honest, observe, notice, and take control. Do not wait for permission or validation. Your life is yours, even if it has been quietly stolen for years. Stand, act, and reclaim. Sleep only if you choose to, and wake fully when you must. Truth, awareness, and courage will carry you through. If you're watching this, please like the video, subscribe, and stay till the end. Remember, no one has the right to steal your life, not even the people you love. Wake up, act, and live for yourself, because life does not wait, and neither should you. After all that happened, after the betrayal, the deception, the lost years, I finally understood the weight of truly waking up. I realized that the world does not stop for anyone, and time never waits. 23 years of my life had been lived in a haze, in a false security that was handed to me by someone I trusted most. I had let my love and faith in another person blind me to reality, but now I could see clearly. Each morning I rise, I remind myself that life is precious and fleeting, and no one has the right to control it for you, not even your closest family. I think back to the nights when I was sleeping, unaware, and I feel both sorrow for the lost time and gratitude that I am finally awake. The sorrow is quiet, heavy, and reflective. It is not bitterness, but a recognition of what was taken and what I have now reclaimed. Living in my small apartment, I have learned to appreciate the simplicity of life, the sound of the wind against the windows, the light as it spills across the room in the morning, the smell of fresh coffee. All of these are no longer ordinary. They are reminders that I am alive, aware, and free. I feed the birds outside my window. I water the small plants I keep, and I take long walks in the nearby park. These are small acts, but they are mine, uninterrupted and fully chosen. In these moments, I feel the power of autonomy, the quiet victory of reclaiming every day that was once stolen from me. I also remind myself that the strength I have now did not come from rage or hate, but from patience, observation, and the willingness to act when the moment came. The power of calm action is stronger than any shouted accusation or emotional outburst. I think about Margaret and my brother, the people who tried to control me for decades. They thought their secret was safe, that I would remain under the spell of the pills forever. They assumed I would never notice, never wake up, never take back what was mine. But they were wrong. Their attempts at control, their deceit, and their laughter at my ignorance only taught me to watch, to observe, and to wait. The betrayal was complete, yes, but so was my eventual understanding. Their manipulation cannot erase the knowledge, clarity, and power I gained once I saw the truth. Every secret, every lie, every stolen moment became a tool for my liberation. They underestimated the patience of a person who loves deeply but learns to protect herself. Now, I live without fear. I sleep naturally, without pills, without sedation, without the interference of anyone else. I feel every hour, every breath, and every sensation fully. The night is no longer a time of fear or missed moments. It is a time of rest that I have earned. I wake each day alert, aware, and ready to make choices for myself. I make meals I enjoy. I read books that teach me more about the world than I could ever have imagined. And I write letters I may never send, just to express the depth of my thoughts and feelings. Life feels richer now, even though I am older. The years I lost do not diminish the joy I feel in reclaiming the present. I also reflect on forgiveness, not as a gift for those who wronged me, but as a liberation for myself. Forgiveness does not mean forgetting or excusing. It means releasing the hold that their actions had on my mind and heart. I forgive in order to live freely, in order to enjoy the simple pleasures of each day, and in order to ensure that my energy is used to build my life, not to relive their betrayal. I have learned that peace does not come from revenge alone. It comes from the conscious decision to live without the weight of someone else's deceit. The truth is the most powerful tool a person can wield, and using it wisely brings a strength that cannot be taken away. Looking forward, I feel a sense of purpose I had not known in decades. I want to help others who have been deceived, silenced, or manipulated, to show them that awakening is possible, that it is never too late, and that clarity and action can reclaim a lifetime of lost dignity. I think of women my age, men my age, anyone who has felt powerless in the hands of others, and I want them to see that the power to act has always been theirs. Life is not just to be survived, it is to be experienced fully, consciously, and without fear. My own journey from deception to awareness has shown me that even when years are lost, the right choices can create a life worth living, full of meaning, autonomy, and inner strength. If you are watching this, know that it is never too late to take back your life. Even if decades have been lost to betrayal, manipulation, or control, the present moment is yours. Observe carefully, act deliberately, and reclaim what belongs to you: your freedom, your peace, your body, your mind, and your life. There is no shame in reclaiming what has been taken. There is power in awareness, courage in deliberate action, and peace in finally living fully awake. This is my life now, unbound, fully my own, and I will never let anyone take it from me again. If you're watching this, please like the video, subscribe, and stay till the end. Remember, it is never too late to wake up, to see the truth, and to reclaim your life. Take action, stand firm, live fully. The years may have passed, but the power to shape the rest of your life is still in your hands.